I stood in my father's office, my hands trembling slightly as he paced behind his oak desk. The family business logo, Bright Star Industries, cast a shadow on the wall behind him, a constant reminder of the legacy I was supposedly failing to uphold. "Look at these numbers, Emma," he snapped, slapping down the quarterly report. "Down 15% under your management. Your grandfather built this company from nothing, and you're destroying it in months. You never even gave my strategies a chance," I shot back, my voice sharper than intended. "I've been begging for a budget to test automation for months." "Enough," he cut me off, his face reddening. "Your brother Daniel was right. You're too weak, too soft for this business. All these new ideas, digital transformations, that's not how we do things here." My mother sat quietly in the corner, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her designer handbag. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She never did when Dad was in one of his moods. "But the market is changing," I argued. "If we don't adapt—" I said enough. Dad slammed his hand on the desk. "You've had your chance. 9 months as regional director, and all you've done is push for changes we don't need. Daniel will take over your position effective immediately." "This is absurd," I snapped, my composure cracking. "Daniel, who lost us the Carter deal because he was too hungover to show up? You're choosing him over me?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Daniel, my younger brother, who spent more time sailing than working, who'd never even bothered to learn our inventory system. "Edel? You can't be serious," I whispered. Mum finally spoke up, her voice soft but firm. "Your father knows best, Emma. Maybe this is a sign you should explore other opportunities." "Opportunities?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean sit at home and play the perfect daughter while Daniel runs this company into the ground?" Looked between them, my father, red-faced and rigid with anger, and my mother, perfectly composed as always, more concerned with appearances than actual business sense. 30 years old with an MBA from Stanford and 6 years of experience at top consulting firms, and they still saw me as the little girl who wasn't tough enough to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. "Fine," I said, my voice ice cold. "I quit." Dad scoffed. "You can't quit, you're fired." "Fired?" I sneered, stepping closer to his desk. "You think you can erase my decade of work here with one word? I made this company profitable while Daniel was off partying." I took off my company ID and placed it carefully on his desk. "You'll regret this," I said quietly. "Are you threatening me?" Dad's voice rose dangerously. "No," I replied, gathering my dignity. "I'm making a promise." As I walked out of that office, I could hear my mother calling after me. "Emma, don't be dramatic. Come back here." "Dramatic?" I turned, my voice cutting through the air. "You let him humiliate me, Mum. Don't expect me to crawl back." But I didn't look back. I had worked at Bright Star Industries since I was 17, starting in the warehouse, learning every aspect of the business. I knew our suppliers, our customers, our strengths, and most importantly, our weaknesses. I also knew something my father didn't. The company was in more trouble than just a 15% quarterly drop. In my office, I quickly downloaded key files onto my personal drive. Nothing confidential, just market research and customer feedback I'd gathered over the past 9 months. Daniel might be taking my position, but my work was coming with me. As I zipped up my laptop bag, I found an old photo of me and Dad from when I was 10, smiling at a company picnic. I shoved it into the box, my throat tight. How did we get here? As I packed my personal items into a box, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lucas, our chief financial officer and one of the few people who supported my modernization plans. "Just heard. They're making a huge mistake. Call me when you can." I smiled slightly. Dad had no idea what he just set in motion. His outdated management style and resistance to change weren't just costing us market share. They were driving away our best talent. Lucas wasn't the only one who saw it. You'll see, I muttered, gripping my phone. They think Daniel's their saviour. He'll sink them by Christmas. Walking through the warehouse for the last time, I stopped to say goodbye to the workers I'd gotten to know over the years. Many looked shocked, some angry on my behalf. Don't worry about me, I told them. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is getting pushed out of your comfort zone. Outside, I placed my box in my car and took one last look at the building. Bright Star Industries had been my whole life, my inheritance, my future. Now, it was just another company making the fatal mistake of clinging to the past. I clenched the steering wheel, my knuckles white. You want to play favourites, Dad? Fine. I'll build something that makes Bright Star look like a corner store. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd been saving for a special occasion. Hello, Robert. It's Emma Brightstar. Remember that investment opportunity we discussed? I'm ready to talk details. The next 9 months would change everything. Dad thought he was protecting his precious company from my progressive ideas. Instead, he'd just given me the push I needed to become his worst nightmare. Not just a competitor, but a threat he never saw coming. Every sleepless night, every pitch meeting, every rejected proposal I'd endured under Dad's thumb fueled me. This wasn't just business, it was personal. Little did they know, being fired was just the beginning of my story. The real shock would come when they discovered exactly what I was capable of doing on my own. 9 months later, I sat in my sleek uptown office reviewing the final documents. The view of the coastal skyline was a far cry from my old workspace at Bright Star Industries, but that wasn't the only thing that had changed. The numbers look good, Robert said, sliding another contract across my desk. Your father has no idea how bad things have gotten at Bright Star. Their major clients are jumping ship and... Daniel, he chuckled. Well, let's just say sailing skills don't translate to business acumen. He fumbled the Peterson pitch in 20 minutes, I said, smirking. I heard he forgot their CEO's name. Classic Daniel. I smiled, remembering how quickly everything had fallen into place after that fateful day. Robert, a venture capitalist I'd met at a business conference, had been eager to back my new company, Future Tech Solutions. We'd spent the past 9 months poaching top talent from Bright Star and other competitors, implementing the very same modernization strategies my father had rejected. My phone buzzed. A text from Lucas, who'd resigned from Bright Star 6 months ago to join me as CFO. Your brother just lost the Peterson account. Your father's having a meltdown. Good, I replied, my fingers flying over the keyboard. Let them sweat. They underestimated me for years. Now they'll pay the price. I wasn't surprised. The Peterson account had been with Bright Star for 25 years. I'd personally handled their business for the past 4, which was why they'd followed me to Future Tech without hesitation. Emma? Robert leaned forward, his expression serious. Bright Star Industries stock has dropped 45% since you left. They're vulnerable. If we move now... I nodded, pulling up the presentation on my laptop. The hostile takeover proposal is ready. We've acquired enough shares through shell companies over the past few months. One more push and we'll have controlling interest. This is it, I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. Dad thought he could bury me. Now I'm the one holding the shovel. Just then, my assistant Sophie knocked and entered. Miss Brightstar, your mother's been calling the office. She says it's urgent. Of course it was. Mum always thought everything was urgent. I hadn't spoken to my parents since that day, though I'd heard plenty through the grapevine. Dad's temper had gotten worse as the company struggled. Daniel was in over his head, and their best employees were leaving in droves. Tell her I'm in a meeting, I replied. Actually, tell her I'll see them all very soon. Sophie nodded, trying to hide her smile. She left a voicemail, she added, sounded like she was crying, said your father's been up all night pacing. Let him pace, I said coolly. He made his choice when he picked Daniel. Now he gets to live with it. Everyone in the office knew what was coming. The next week passed in a blur of meetings and legal documents. Finally, everything was in place. Bright Star Industries was calling an emergency shareholders meeting to address the company's declining performance. As the new majority shareholder, though they didn't know it yet, I had a front row seat to what would become the most dramatic family reunion in corporate history. The morning of the meeting, I stood in front of my full-length mirror adjusting my designer suit. Gone was the timid daughter trying to please her father. In her place stood a chief operating officer who'd built a successful company from scratch in 9 months. I touched the necklace Dad gave me for my 18th birthday, a rare moment of pride in his eyes. Today, that memory felt like a betrayal. "Ready?" Lucas asked, waiting by my office door. I grabbed my briefcase containing the takeover documents. Time to show them exactly how weak I am. We arrived at Bright Star Industries early. Through the glass doors, I could see the shareholders gathering in the main conference room. Dad sat at the head of the table, trying to maintain his usual authoritative presence, but looking notably strained. Mum sat beside him, perfectly coiffed as always, but with worry lines around her eyes. Daniel was there too, fumbling with his presentation notes. "Your brother looks like he's about to be sick," Lucas whispered. "Wait until he sees what's coming," I replied. At exactly 10:00 a.m., the meeting was called to order. I stood in the hallway, listening as Dad tried to explain away the company's failures, blaming market conditions, foreign competition, everything except his own poor leadership. "He's lying through his teeth," I murmured to Lucas. "I warned him about those supply chain issues 2 years ago. He called me paranoid." Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The chairman announced, "And now we must address the elephant in the room. A significant portion of company shares has been acquired by a new entity over the past 9 months. The new majority shareholder is here today to discuss the future of Bright Star Industries." I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath, my father's angry demand to know who dared to try and take his company. Daniel was stuttering something about legal actions. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the conference room doors and walked in. The room fell silent. Mum's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, spilling across the polished table. Dad's face went from red to white in seconds. Daniel looked like he might actually faint. I walked to the front of the room, placed my briefcase on the table and smiled. "Shall we begin?" "This is impossible," Dad sputtered, half rising from his chair. "You can't. You don't have the resources to—" "Actually," I said, opening my briefcase and distributing documents to the board members, "I do. Future Tech Solutions, my company, now owns 51% of Bright Star Industries shares. And this," I held up another document, "is our proposal for complete acquisition." "You're a traitor," Dad hissed, his voice low and venomous. "After everything I gave you, you stabbed me in the back?" "Gave me?" I retorted, my eyes blazing. "You gave me insults and impossible expectations while Daniel got a free pass?" Mum was dabbing at the spilled coffee with trembling hands, her perfect composure finally cracking. "Emma, darling, surely we can discuss this as a family." "Family?" I laughed, but there was no humour in it. "We stopped being a family the day you sat silently while Dad threw me out of my own inheritance. When you chose Daniel, who couldn't tell a balance sheet from a birthday card, to run this company instead of me." Daniel stood up, his face red. "Now wait just a minute." "Quarterly profits down 65%, I cut him off, clicking through my presentation. 8 major clients lost, 32 key employees resigned, and, I paused for effect, 3 pending lawsuits from customers due to quality control issues. Did I miss anything, Daniel? Or were you too busy working on your sailing to notice the company was sinking?" "You're twisting the truth," Daniel shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I've been working hard." "Hard?" I scoffed. "You missed half the board meetings because you were networking on a yacht." The board members were whispering among themselves, reviewing the documents I'd provided. I could see the realization dawning on their faces. Bright Star Industries was no longer the powerhouse it had been. "This is outrageous." Dad slammed his fist on the table. I built this company. No, I interrupted, my voice sharp. Grandfather built this company. You inherited it, just like you plan to hand it to Daniel. The difference is, I earn my place here. I clicked to the next slide, showing Future Tech's impressive growth charts. While you were clinging to outdated methods, I built a modern, efficient company. We've doubled our market share in 9 months. Our digital infrastructure cuts costs by 45%. And those clients you lost? I smiled. They're all with us now. The board members were nodding. They could see the numbers didn't lie. You can't do this to your own father, Mum pleaded. Watch me, I replied. I'm offering a fair price for the remaining shares, well above market value. The alternative is watching Bright Star Industries become completely obsolete within a year. You're heartless, Mum whispered, tears in her eyes. We're your parents. Heartless? I snapped. You watched Dad tear me down for years and said nothing. Where was your heart then? Dad slumped in his chair, suddenly looking old. Why? He asked quietly. Why not just build your own success? Why come back to destroy what I built? I walked over to him, placing my hands on the table and leaning forward. Because you needed to learn that being a woman doesn't make me weak, that your daughter could be just as capable, no more capable than your precious son. Consider this a very expensive business lesson. The vote was quick and decisive. The board approved the acquisition almost unanimously. As the meeting adjourned, I watched my father sign the final documents, his hand shaking slightly. The Bright Star name stays, I told him as he stood to leave, but everything else changes. Starting tomorrow. He nodded stiffly, not meeting my eyes. Mum tried to hug me, but I stepped back. Daniel had already slunk out of the room, probably heading straight to the marina. You've ruined us, Mum said, her voice breaking. Was it worth it? You've ruined yourselves, I replied, my tone final. I just took what I'd already earned. Later that evening, I stood in what had been my father's office, my office now. The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across the floor. Lucas knocked and entered carrying 2 glasses of champagne. Congratulations, Mum, he said, handing me a glass. I took it looking around the office. You know what the funny thing is? Dad always said I was too soft for business, but he never understood true strength isn't about being tough. It's about being smart, adaptable, and willing to change. To change. Lucas raised his glass. And to karma, I added with a smile. I walked to the window, staring at the skyline. They thought they could break me, I said softly, but they only made me unstoppable. The next morning, a moving company arrived to clear out the old office furniture. Everything was getting an upgrade. New technology, new systems, new leadership. As I watched them work, my phone buzzed with a text from Mum. Your father would like to talk. I stared at the message, my jaw tight. Too late, I whispered, deleting it. The time for talking was over. Now it was time to build.